Welcome back to the Bush Bee Man Show, where your questions get answered. This is one of the new ideas we're running for 2022. We're putting out there that if you've got some questions for the Bush Bee Man that you'd like answered, all you got to do is send us an email and you might be the leader of this show as well. And then we've got a lovely young couple that have been watching the show for a while and they've sent us a question, so we're going to find out what that is.
Hey Bush Bee Man, my name's Callahan and this is my wife Melinda.
And we're from Council Grove, Kansas in the United States, and we have a two-part question for you.
The first question is, what tools and supplies do you normally bring with you for a bee cutout?
And my question is, how do you steal your wife's tools without getting caught?
Thanks for that question. I tell you what, now there's an involved question for the first bloomin' questionnaire. Bloomin' doing cutouts. I tell you what, that is an experience. Now, if you're new to beekeeping and you want to get some free bees, this is normally where you go. You get started, maybe you catch a swarm, and next thing you know, you get a call from your neighbour or your friend or your uncle or your auntie or whoever knows where they are, and they say, oh, we've got some bees in a wall or in a telephone box, or hell, where we had them in the ground in a jolly Telstra thing underground. All sorts of crazy crap we've done. And there's lots of different ways you can go about it. I'm going to tell you some basic things that I take with me to a cutout. I have to say that it's an interesting job and allow some time. The first thing you want to do is not go there late in the afternoon because you're never going to get it all done. Get there early because whatever you think's going to happen with a cutout, it probably will go awry. That's my first piece of advice. The first thing you're probably going to want to take with you is obviously your gloves and a bee suit. If you happen to have more than one bee suit, your older bee suit is ideal because you're going to get covered in crap when you do this job. At least one pair of gloves, maybe two would be good. Some people use rubber gloves so they can wash the honey off. Me, I got plenty of leather gloves that I can bloom and wash up and treat with my wife's lovely leather gear stuff so they don't go rotten after I wash them, so that's all good. It seems to keep them soft and supple. You're going to want yourself a bucket of water, which is something that you quite often forget, because then you're going to be able to wash your hands clean, or your gloves clean for that matter, get all the honey and crap off. You're going to want to take your I like these long hive tools, because then you can slide along and you can pull things apart a bit easier. Good idea to take yourself a jimmy bar, because quite often they're stuck under something that you can't lift up too easily. And what's my other favourite toy? In here. And another handy toy you can take with you is a paint scraper. This is only a short-handled paint scraper. I have one with a longer handle, which so you can actually scrape along and get the blooming foundation frame and the honey and the whole thing. And so, well, anyway, when you get to your first cutout, you'll know it's a little bit involved. You're going to want yourself a clean bucket, so you've got somewhere to put your honey. And another really helpful idea that I find is you're going to want to take yourself a clean pot like this, to put your brood frames in before you actually, well, they're not actually frames at this point in time, they're actually from the brood nest. You can put them in there and then the bees can accumulate and look after them and do what they need to do before you get to putting them on the frames, because getting them on the frames is the interesting part. So you get to the eventually you get through all the honey. So first thing to remember is when you're starting out, the honey's going to be on the outside. So there's going to be a sticky surface when you get started. So you want to, and of course, someone's going to put in there, what about your smoker? You know what? Just to be completely honest with you, with all the cutouts I've done, for the most part, the smoking is only just to make you feel better, because they just don't care. When you start pulling their nest apart, if they're in a bad mood or they're actually angry bees, the smoke doesn't really calm them down a hell of a lot. Sometimes it chases the queen away from you, so you find it's harder to find her. So as far as smoke goes and a cutout, I think less is more. That's my opinion. I do have a smoker with me just in case, and I do light it up, and usually I use that to smoke myself. So you start from the outside of your nest where all the honey is, and then by the time you get to your brood frames, you're going to be covered in sticky, blooming hands are going to be covered in honey, or your gloves, depending on how you are going. So you're going to want to get to that point and you put your honey in your bucket, and then you want to wash your hands before you get to the brood frames, okay? So you want to wash off all the honey and stickery, because the less bees you get stuck to your hands and stuck in everything, the better. Because, I mean, the idea is to try and keep some of the bees alive, obviously, when you get home. Because one sad fact of a cutout is you're going to lose a few bees amongst the journey. I mean, it's just how it goes. Don't get too sad, because as a general rule, if you're doing a cutout, for the most part, the people are going to destroy the entire hive, so you're there to rescue them. So just keep that in mind. It's a little bit messy, but it is what it is. But if you want to limit the amount of losses, you don't want to take your sticky honey hands to the brood frames. Because once you get to that point, when you get the brood, it's reasonably solid and stable, and it doesn't have a whole lot of sticky muck all around it, because it'll have a circle around the top, and you want to try and get rid of that. You just want the brood frames by themselves, because then you don't end up with all the bees stuck, and it's a great big, well, it's really just a sticky mess. The first couple of cutouts I did, I had the honey and the brood frames and everybody all together, and they all, well, they did survive, but they spent a fair bit of time licking and cleaning and sucking out the box, and I think it took them a week to put themselves back together, and that was not ideal. So I recommend you keep the honey in your bucket and you keep your brood in your other pot, and then you can figure out your mess going forward. Okay. Also, a very important thing that you might want to forget is you actually want to take yourself a hive with you, because that's kind of helpful. And in your hive, you're going to want to have some frames. So you get some frames like this, which is just the, obviously not the solid frames. And you want some rubber bands, so you can put you're laying your brood frames on here. They're sitting there, and you're going to slide your rubber band over the top to hold it all together. And this old rubber band's sad, but there you go. It's probably been in my shed too long. Oh, come on, be nice to me. That's not what you want to happen when you're trying to hold the frames on. And you put them along like this. And then you've got your brood sitting in here. So then the girls can work it from that side and from this side. And then eventually, believe it or not, the bees will eat the rubber bands and chuck them out the front of the hive. It's quite fascinating. I have a fan, Diane, who sent me this idea though, which I thought was really groovy. So she was going through an old beekeeper's shed, cleaning up, because when us old beekeepers pass away, we've got crap everywhere, and they were cleaning up the old man's shed. I'll read, what was his name? Old Murray. They were cleaning up Murray's shed and doing the right thing, as you do, helping out, because he was a member of their bee club, and they were in there getting organised. And Diane came across this fancy idea, which I think is pretty cool. And he's actually got some wire mesh here, some wide wire mesh, and he's bent a few little bits up so as it'll clip onto hold on to the actual brood frame. And then she's popped some rubber bands across the front. And the good thing about this is, because when you do the other method, you have to be careful when you stack it. You've got the actual brood is sitting out from the blooming frame itself. So you can imagine when they build a brood frame properly, it's nice and even and both sides are beautiful. Whereas you do it this way, eventually you have to put those brood frames upstairs and let them breathe that out and try and get your box into some semblance of order going forward. But I thought that was a really cool idea. We'll put that up in the description so you can have a check that out. I reckon, thank you, Diane, that's awesome. We're going to give that a crack the next cutout we do. Now, there's a lot of footage out there on YouTube, jolly about cutouts and all the rest of it that goes on. And I think sometimes they're a bit generous and perhaps they don't show you the ones that go awry. We've shown you a few that haven't been completely perfect. It's a real sod when you don't catch the queen. You're not 100%. Sometimes the queen gets stuck in the honey, which is a real shame, and that's a blow. If you're lucky, you're going to have some young eggs and larvae that the girls can turn into a queen, but of course they're in chaos and crisis mode when you put them in their hive. So just be aware that it's not 100% success rate when it comes to a cutout, but you know what? It's worth trying to save the ladies, because it's either that or a tin of petrol, and I think you're a better option than the petrol. So give it a crack, have some fun. Why not? Put it up there and let the world see what's going on. Most important though, like I tried to say earlier on, keep your honey separate. You can feed it back to them when you get out there. We've done water it down a little bit and put it in a feeder, feed it back to them so they can eat their own honey back. Try not to jolly do that if you've got other beekeepers around, and you might, because honey can have an infection from the hive that you've just taken a cutout from. Not ideal to open feed, so you want to keep it secluded and you want to let the ladies have it themselves. But having said that, hell, if you don't want to do the honey thing, get some sugar water and feed that to them. At least give them a bit of a chance, because they're obviously happy where they were, and now they've been a bit distressed because you've taken them and turned them upside down and But you know, hell, I guess any rescue's a bit risky. And I've played around, and you would have seen on the show that I've had a few goes at making a vacuum cleaner. I've had a lot of correspondence from people with vacuums. I've seen a lot of other YouTube videos about vacuum cleaning, and personally, I've had a reasonable success sucking the bees into the vacuum cleaner, and they all look fine, and you put them in the hive, but the mortality rate is fairly high, because I don't know, I think by the time they get sucked down the tube, and they're a pretty delicate thing, a bee, you know, you damage a leg or you damage a wing, and then they kind of get excited with each other because they don't like it to be sick. And so I personally have drifted away from the vacuum idea. I am sure there's going to be plenty of people in the comments tell us how they make a good vacuum cleaner. But you know what? In the end, if you can't get to the bees reasonably sensibly, it's going to be a shit show anyway. So me, I usually leave the vacuum cleaner at home. Now, this is a bit dicey, and I'm not sure whether I should share this on YouTube, because my wife watches this show as well. So she'll be sitting on the lounge room knowing all my tricks if I tell you too much. Truth be told, though, after 35 years of marriage, I think half the shit I steal is half mine anyway, so I figure I'm only stealing half of it, so that's a good start. But it was much easier when she worked full-time, because she wasn't always around here to protect her things. Now, when I go into the house and she goes, well, she can hear me rattling. She might be sitting at the table doing some orders or something, and she hears me rattling around in her kitchen cupboard, and she'll go, what are you doing, bush bee man? And so then I have to come up with some excuse. And normally the negotiating is, well, I'll borrow this and get you a new one. Or now it's got to the point where she sees it go out the door, and I swear she's online ordering her new drill as it's walking out the back door. Because, I mean, that's fair too, once you see what I do with them. But all in all, she's just a gracious woman, and somehow or other, I think she's just given up. So she knows, you know, she's taking one for the team, because, heck, bees rule. So if you enjoy that idea and you've got a question, send it along and we'll attempt to answer your question. Either we'll do a similar thing to this and show you some older footage, or we might have to do a whole new episode. Just best depends on what the question is and where we are and where you are, and hell, for that matter, where the planet is. Let's all have some fun together and send in your questions and help us help you to help the show grow. So there should be a link at the bottom of this somewhere around down here in the linking up department. I don't know, that's the lad's job. Down here there'll be a link, and we want to send your video question to that link. So then we can watch it, and you can get your faces on the Bush Bee Man show for a start. And what's more, you get your questions answered. How cool! It's a win-win-win. Everybody wins. So if you're new to beekeeping, or hell, if you're old to beekeeping, and you just want to give me a challenge just to mess with me, that can work too. So let's make 2022 an exciting time for everybody concerned, and send in your questions and get involved. In this world of information overload, we've gone a little old school, because I like to be able to actually read and look at photos and look at the video footage, and it, I don't know, seems to go into my old brain a little bit easier if it's there in a written format. So we've lashed out, and we've actually started to write up basics to beekeeping on our website. So if you like reading and you'd like a little bit more in-depth instructions, go over to the website, click on the, I don't know, Basic to Beekeeping page, I'm guessing it's going to be called, and just check that out. Give us some feedback, let us know what you think. Hell, you know what? This is an interactive thing. We're all living in this beekeeping world together. And even if you're not a beekeeper and you just enjoy the show, it's hellishly interesting.